So the rand sinking to a new three-year low, touching and breaching the 19 rand mark against the US dollar in today's trade at over 24 rand to the pound. So the last time we were here was during the throes of COVID and when we were in harsh lockdown. Then there's the breaking news this afternoon of accusations leveled against the country by the US in terms of helping arm the Russians, as well as biting power cuts and the risk of economic stagnation. There's a lot to talk about, so let's do that with Cilliers, currency strategist at Treasury One, to explain the factors that are really rocking the rand. Good evening to you and welcome to the program. It would seem the rand needs not only a seatbelt, it needs a helmet, it needs a number of different things, because we keep having to rewrite the headlines just this afternoon alone as the rand's movements yo-yo. Make things really easy for all of our viewers to understand just some of the pummeling impacts of today's movements in the markets and of course what's happening diplomatically.
Yes. Good afternoon, and good afternoon to all the viewers out there. Well, I've watched the earlier part of the show, and it's all about load shedding, and it's all about a president that stands there, and I almost want to say underestimates our intelligence by giving me a lesson in how load shedding works so that the grid doesn't collapse. The question, Mr. President, is not that. The question is, what are you going to do? And what is the actual plans put in place to bring more power generation to the grid so that the grid does not face collapse? We need to see concrete plans, because that's one of the absolute most important reasons why we are where we are today on the rand. Businesses find it impossible to do business. They cannot create positions, they cannot create jobs. They are more or less looking at retrenching people and lowering their overheads because their income becomes smaller and smaller and smaller because of the cost of doing business. And all we're doing is explaining why it is, not what we are doing about it. Then comes on the back of that also Transnet, that's also in the doldrums, that's not functioning properly. That cannot get especially our mining products to harbors for export, which simply means that the profitability of mining houses is under pressure. If their income is under pressure, then the fiscus becomes under pressure because the tax collection is lower. Not only that, but we earn less foreign exchange. So our figures on our trade balance is also influenced that. In other words, our trade terms is starting to look and turn more negative. Then this afternoon, part of a perfect storm on the back of a grey listing that's already happened, already on the back of ratings agencies that it's already said we're moving you from neutral to negative, comes the statement by the US ambassador that says we actually supplied arms and loaded possibly arms onto the ship that docked into Simonstown during the beginning of December. Now, I'm once again afraid to say that the question was posed to Mr. Ramaphosa, and what does he say? He says, and his answer is, let's give it time to fruition. In time, we will actually be able to tell you what happens. So we have an investigation. Once again, dear Mr. President, we have so many investigations, also SCOPA. There's commissions of inquiry, there's investigations into everything, and everything has got to go to fruition. Well, I'm afraid to say that at this point in time, the investors in the world has come to fruition. They've reached fruition, right, and decided to disassociate them from South Africa. It's becoming a not investable country, and they'd rather sell their government bonds and they'd rather move away from the country than investing in this country. So they've come to fruition, they've made a decision, and they're voting with their money by taking it and running out of the country.
So what you're describing, and this perfect storm and this cocktail of negative movements within South Africa that is affecting sentiment, investment sentiment in the country, we can't afford to hide under the dining room table and hope that things are going to turn around. You weren't satisfied, as you say, with what the president or how the president responded on questions relating to Eskom and an operational plan for a turnaround, a real sort of deadline-driven plan for a turnaround. The question then becomes, is the run on the rand likely to persist, and for how long? It sounds like we're heading, in a really bad direction already based on what you've just told us.
Well, once again, I get back and I say that everything that I've mentioned becomes local factors. Now, some years back, we've always said that what happens on the rand and what happens with the value of the rand, because of the way things work and operate within an international economy of which we are, 70 to 80% of what happens on the rand is influenced by what happens in the world, like interest rates in America, inflation in America, and trade throughout the world, and emerging market sentiment and so forth. But the local factors is now taking precedent and stepping to the forefront and becoming more of an issue than ever before. And I'm afraid to say that it's taking a bigger issue than what happens internationally. And the only way to change that is to stop investigations and actually come with concrete plans and speak from one mouth. And lay those plans on the table and tell the investors, tell the consumers in South Africa exactly what is going to happen, how it's going to be solved, and when it's going to be solved. Not just how, but when. And then, as I say, speak from... So in other words, political leadership. Show political leadership and stop speaking about... I mean, yesterday we heard...
I got to stop you there, Andre, because I don't have, unfortunately, don't have too much time at my disposal. But really, thanks for talking to us just about this, the combination of different factors and where the opportunity lies, especially because a lot of what a big part of what we do is around sentiment that affects, people's warmth towards the currency or their need to distance themselves. And that's something we can certainly do something about. But it does hinge on having operational plans for a turnaround in South Africa. We appreciate your analysis. Andre Cilliers is currency strategist at Treasury One.